With chapter 1154, we've finally gotten to know who Rock's Zebec is. We've seen his face, and now we know he's Blackbeard's father. As often happens when a powerful character is introduced, the entire One Piece community starts theorizing about what his devil fruit might be. And since many of you have asked me to talk about it, here's my opinion and theory on the subject. The first question we need to ask is whether Zebec has a devil fruit. Personally, I believe he does. The reason is because Zebec and Blackbeard are the antithesis of Roger and Shanks. Roger and Shanks are the most powerful pirates without devil fruits. They rely solely on haki. There's no need to include another one like them. It would be unoriginal, in a manga filled with powers, to repeat the idea of another pirate relying exclusively on haki, especially considering the vast number of possibilities devil fruits offer. Shanks' crew is made up of pirates without devil fruits, while Blackbeard's crew was formed with the goal of obtaining the best devil fruits for themselves. The same must have happened with their counterparts. Roger's main crew didn't have devil fruits, while those under Zebec ended up being users of extremely powerful ones. And most importantly, Oda loves to keep us guessing. He now has the perfect opportunity to play with us, dropping hints little by little until he finally reveals what fruit Zebec has. Zebec is the kind of character that, if it were confirmed he doesn't have a devil fruit, it would be a letdown, because everyone expects that he does, and that's the most important reason. So then, assuming he does have a fruit, the next question is it one we already know, or a new one? Here too, I lean toward one idea over the other. Zebec's fruit should be one we already know, for several reasons. Zebec is one of the most powerful characters in One Piece, so his fruit also has to be extremely powerful. And it can't be a random one, it has to make sense and fit his character. We're at a point in the story where it's already been established that, aside from the Yami Yami no Mi, the most powerful fruits are the mythical Zoan types. Anything below that wouldn't create as much excitement unless it's because we already know that fruit. I mean, if they suddenly tell us that Zebec had, I don't know, the plasma fruit, we'd be like, okay, just another one. Sure, it's powerful, but what does plasma have to do with Zebec? His personality, his story, or his lore? Nothing. However, if they suddenly say he had the Ope Ope no Mi, even though it's technically a random paramecia, it would impress us, because we already know it and we know that it currently belongs to Trafalgar Law. So at this point in the story, it's difficult to introduce a new fruit for someone who was possibly the most powerful man of his era. It would need to be a fruit that really holds importance in the lore of One Piece. And if Oda did manage to pull that off, he'd still face another problem. Where is that fruit now? If it's truly so important, why doesn't anyone relevant in the current timeline have it? Would he really use such a significant devil fruit only for a flashback? There's only one possible way for all this to make sense: if Oda introduces a new fruit that we haven't seen yet, but that also becomes important in the present storyline. The only fruit that fits both of those conditions is Dragon's devil fruit. Even from a chronological perspective, it could work. When Zebec supposedly died in God Valley, Dragon was 17 years old, so as a possibility it's interesting. But honestly, there's no solid evidence to back it up. It's pure speculation. At most we could say that Dragon was already a marine at the time, and may have been present at God Valley. There he could have obtained the fruit after Zebec's death, and years later he left the Marines after realizing there was no real justice there. Anyway, setting that idea aside, I strongly doubt Zebec had a fruit that we don't already know today. So let's talk about the most likely candidates. As I said in the previous video, the one that makes the most sense is the Yami Yami no Mi. Blackbeard is Zebec's son, and inherited his will of becoming the king of the world. So why not? He may have ended up with the same fruit as well. Ever since he was an orphan child, Blackbeard was determined to obtain the Yami Yami no Mi. He even knew what it looked like. That's extremely suspicious. If he knew that his father once had it, he could have done his research to find out what it looked like, and then crafted a plan to obtain it. Though it's quite strange that a child orphan would have access to the Devil Fruit Encyclopedia, since it's only in the possession of certain scientists. The most logical, and at the same time the craziest theory, is one I've mentioned many times, that somehow, in a way we don't yet understand, Zebec's soul ended up inside Blackbeard, and he's the one guiding him toward fulfilling his goal. It would also make sense that the only two people capable of defeating Zebec at God Valley were Roger and Garp, since neither of them had devil fruits, and relied entirely on haki. In other words, they're the perfect counters to the Yami Yami no Mi, because its user wouldn't be able to nullify their abilities. The only visual clue we have about Zebec's fruit is his Jolly Roger, which usually represents something about the captain himself. From the skull, there's something coming off it, like smoke or mist. That could represent the darkness emitted by the Yami Yami no Mi. However, this also ties into another theory that's been floating around for a few years now. Instead of darkness, it could be white floating hair like what Luffy has in Gear 5th. that would mean Zebec might have been the previous user of the Gomu Gomu no Mi. One argument in favor of this theory is that if Blackbeard was searching for his father's fruit, it makes sense that he went to Drum Island, as he might have heard rumors that the Hito no Mi model Nika was there. Also, the kingdom's name, Drum, literally means drum, which ties perfectly into Nika and the drums of liberation. The only problem with all of this is that, according to the Gorosei, no one had awakened that fruit since the Void Century. So if Zebec really had it, he was never able to awaken it. That would be explained by the idea that his will didn't align with the fruit's will. Conquering the world and liberating it are two completely opposite ideologies. After Zebec's death, years passed before the world government was finally able to track down the fruit. But while it was being transported to Marihua, it was Shank's crew who once again ruined Imu's plans in their effort to get the fruit. And now, let's move on to the newest idea. With chapter 1154, there's another devil fruit that's on everyone's lips, the Ope Ope no Mi. There are two details from the chapter that made One Piece fans start to believe that Zebec might have had this fruit, which is currently in the possession of Law. First, the position of Zebec's fingers resembles that of another pirate when he uses the fruit. And yes, that's true, but we also have to consider that in that specific panel, Zebec is telling Loki he's going to ask him two questions. So the position of his two fingers is fully justified in that context. However, knowing Oda, I don't think this explanation entirely rules out the theory, because the author of One Piece is well known for embedding double meanings into his scenes. That is, he draws something, we assume it's for one reason, but later we discover it carried a deeper meaning all along. In fact, this very chapter contains an example of that, with the Gallia logo. At first glance, anyone would interpret it as a ship keel resting on wooden planks in a shipyard, but it can also be interpreted as a Viking ship with its oars. So Oda could very well be playing with us again, showing Zebec making this hand gesture, justifying it with the dialogue, while also subtly hinting that he might actually possess the Ope Ope no Mi. What's more, in the previous panel we see Zebec slicing a mountain in two, in a way that's very similar to how Law can combine his sword and devil fruit to cut through massive objects. Still, I don't want to stop at just that, which you've probably already heard discussed everywhere. I want to dive deeper into this theory, because I find it genuinely interesting. It makes sense that Zebec might have had the Ope Ope no Mi, because despite being a paramecia, this fruit plays a massive role in the plot and lore of One Piece. In fact, I would even argue that it's the most important paramecia fruit in the story. We've been told a lot about it, and yet we've still never seen one crucial moment, the fruit's ultimate ability, where the user sacrifices themselves to grant someone eternal youth. And here comes Oda's hidden clue. Doflamingo once said he wanted the Ope Ope no Mia, so he could become king of the world. It doesn't matter how Doflamingo planned to use the Ope Ope no Mi, whether it was to swap bodies with Imu, or to give the fruit to someone else, gain eternal youth, and then replace Imu. None of that really matters. What does matter is the connection of concepts, the fact that Oda mentioned the Ope no Mi in relation to becoming the king of the world. That alone could be one of those classic bits of foreshadowing, hinting that someone in the past like Zebec had the Ope no Mi and wanted to become the king of the world. I'm absolutely sure that if, in the next chapter, it's confirmed that Zebec had this fruit, we'd immediately see people on Twitter and other platforms calling Oda a genius, saying he'd already hinted at it through Doflamingo's comment. In any case, all of this fits together really well. Zebec would have a devil fruit that impresses us, not just because it belongs to someone important in the present timeline, but also because it's powerful and deeply relevant. However, as I mentioned at the start, it also needs to have narrative weight, a purpose in the story. If Otranda gives Zebec the Ope Ope no Mi, it's because he needs to justify something major in the plot through that fruit. And this is where my theory comes back in, the idea that Zebec's soul is inside Blackbeard's body, and that Blackbeard might be a Buccaneer. Let's think about it. In Egghead, Oda introduced a new race, the Buccaneers. And in chapter 1104, when Kuma appears to save Bonnie, we're given a hint that the Buccaneers have a mysterious power. Vegapunk is shocked that Kuma, despite no longer being conscious, was somehow able to sense that his daughter was in danger thousands of kilometers away and came to rescue her. Obviously that makes no sense, not even in the world of One Piece. Observation haki doesn't reach that far. That's why Vegapunk says the following. Now that I think about it, it's illogical that he was able to sense Bonnie's presence on this island and come to find her. Could it be what I'm thinking of? That special trait possessed by the Buccaneers, in addition to their strong bodies. And of course, Oda, being the troll that he is, cuts the sentence right there, leaving us hanging, wondering what that special ability actually is. I'm quite convinced that it has to be something linked to the soul. A father was able to sense his daughter's soul from thousands of kilometers away and rush to her. If Oda has introduced this new race, and left us wondering about a special power they possess, it's obviously because he intends to reveal it later, most likely, when we see another member of the Buccaneer race use it. In other words, it's a power that Oda needs later on to justify something important in the plot. And this specific power fits perfectly to explain what might have happened with Zebec's soul and Blackbeard, assuming both are Buccaneers. It's a very similar situation. Kuma senses his daughter's soul and travels to her. Likewise, Zebec's soul could have traveled to where his son was. It's not exactly the same, but it echoes the idea. In the end, it's about souls and fathers and sons. But of course, to explain how Zebec's soul could have left his body and entered Blackbeard, we need something fantastical, like a devil fruit. And what better fruit than the Ope Ope no Mi, which we already know has wild capabilities, like the perpetual youth operation, or even soul swaps between people. Just remember what Law did with the Straw Hats in Punk Hazard. He swapped their personalities, and the devil fruits remained tied to their original bodies, as we saw with Chopper and Smoker, which means it makes total sense that the Ope Ope no Mi stayed with Zebec's body, and when he died, it simply reincarnated into a new fruit. So yes, the Ope Ope no Mi would be the perfect fruit to explain how Zebec's soul could have ended up in his son's body. Plus, the idea of two souls inside one body could explain why Blackbeard is able to hold two devil fruits. And the fact that he's a Buccaneer also lines up, because in the very same arc where we're introduced to the Buccaneers, Katarina Devon and Saturn say that Teach is special because of his lineage. That might be referring to Zebec, yes, but it could also be referring to the fact that he's a Buccaneer. The Ope Ope no Mi and the Buccaneer race might be the key that ties together all the mysteries surrounding Blackbeard. I kept going in circles, trying to figure out how to connect these two characters, but now everything clicks. And that's where the theory ends. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you were expecting me to say something more original and not just the Ope Ope no Mi like everyone else, well, hold on to the possibility that he might have dragon's fruit instead. I doubt many people have mentioned that one. Or if you want, I'll improvise something even crazier right now. For example, taking into account that a lot of people are saying Buggy might also be Zebec's son, maybe Zebec was actually the previous user of the Barabara no Mi Buggy's fruit. And since he had it awakened, he wasn't just able to split his own body into pieces, but also the environment, like slicing a mountain in half. Although if I'm being honest, I still think the Yami Yami no Mi is the most likely choice. It just makes too much sense for Oda to choose that one for Zebec. All I've done is share my thoughts and present arguments for each possibility. Now it's up to you to decide which theory you believe in. That's all. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments which devil fruit you think Zebec had. Take care and see you soon.